Dear students, welcome to EPG Padasala. We have been discussing about in Indian culture the broader subject, the particular topic Indian aesthetics and poetics, in which so far we have dealt with the origin and development of poetics. We concluded with Rasa Gangadhara, the author being Jagannatha Pandita, Panditaraja Jagannatha Pandita. With him, the development of poetics, Sanskrit poetics or Indian poetics, partially came to an end. And he finally pronounced Ramaniyartha Pratibadaka Shabdaha Kavyam. So the Kavya should be conveying a beautiful meaning, an aesthetical meaning, which should be appreciable by all. We have been at the appropriate places talking about the schools of poetry. Now specifically, we are going to see what are the 8 schools of Sanskrit poetry. In this module, we are going to know the original schools of poetry, the origin, how it came and all, and then the theories of Riti, Rasa, Alankara, Dvani, Guna, and then Anumana school and Auchitya school. These are called 8 schools of poetics. From the very beginning, they have been attempting to just bring out union between different schools of thought with regard to aesthetics, and they were named. The 8 schools are Riti school 1, Rasa school 2, Alankara school 3, Dvani school 4, Vakrokti school 5, Guna school 6, Anumana school 7, and Auchitya school, which happened to be the 8th school. Next, we will find out what is the actual theme of Riti school. As I already told you, Riti means the style or the manner by which a poet writes the poem. See, in the manner or the style, there are different varieties of expressions which are called as styles. They are named as Vaidarbhi, Gaudi, Magadhi, that were already available prior to Vamana. And Dandin and Vamana happen to be the chief exponents of this school. The names given to the Vaidarbhi, Gaudi or Magadhi suggest that they were prevalent in particular regions. When you talk about Riti, it is first pronounced, as I said earlier, Vamana says that Riti Ratma Kavyasya, that is the soul of a Kavya, which is constituted by a series of words conveying the desired sense. The Vamana belonged to 9th century AD. This theory came into vogue in 9th century. The idea of Riti in a poetical composition originated even before Vamaha, but it came to be better understood by Vamana, who pronounced as Riti Ratma Kavyasya in his Kavyalankara Sutra Vritti. He defined Riti as Visishta Padarajana, that means composition of special words or special composition of words. The Riti school holds that the style or the manner contributes to the excellence of literary composition. At first, 2 styles, the Vaidarbhi and Gaudi, were introduced, and later on different schools based on different styles also had been accepted. The Gaudi school belonged to Bengal. The Vaidarbhi laid more stress on sense, whereas the Gaudi style was very much fond of sound. As I told you, they were existing in 6th century AD. According to Vamana, the first one, Vaidarbhi, possesses 10 gunas. So we have been talking about guna theory, gunas earlier also. But what are they? They are Slesha, Prasada, Samata, Madhuryam, Sukumarata, Udaratva, Ojas, Kanti and Samadhi. Here the second one, Gaudi, copiously contains the gunas, Ojas and Kanti. Ojas means the vibrating sound, echoing the sense when a poet makes use of the style, then it becomes ojas. Ojaha samasa bhuishtam. There is a definition. Ojas means there should be lot of compounds in a work. And the vibrating sound also. And which you can see in Banabhatta's writings, who wrote Kadambari, Harshacharita and all. For example, you can say when he wanted to just explain the fall of Ganges from the Akasha Ganga, he describes in a very beautiful manner, echoing the sound and sense simultaneously in a few lines which I would like to quote for the sake of some interest to you. Atha Dhruva pravrittam dharmadhenumiva adho davamana dhavala payodharam udvaradhvanim antakamatana mauli malati malikam aliyamana valakilya rudda rodhasam arundadi dauta taravattvacham twangat tungat tarangat tarattarala taratara tarakam Tapasa vitirna taruna tilodaka pulakita pulidam. Like that, tarattarala taratara tarakam, the vibration which is echoing the flow of the river. If you just go through the entire thing, you will find the sound is very much matched with the fall and the flow of the river. After 800 AD, more styles came into being, and they were Panchali, Lati and Avanti, as I told you, based on the names of the regions. Thus, the gunas are the essential elements of the Riti is concerned. For the first time in Vamana's work, we find the twofold division of gunas, namely Shabda Guna and Artha Guna. So, even in the guna, they wanted to just bifurcate it, which is related to either sound or sense. So, Shabda Guna and Artha Guna. According to him, see Saundaryam Alankara. So, the beautifying feature happens to be Alankara. The Riti theory failed, unfortunately, to achieve wide popularity because Anandavardhana subjected it to trenchant criticism. He said, what is mere Riti is not going to be adding charm to poetry. Mammata has sought to refute the main thesis of Vamana. The inherent weakness of the Riti doctrine lies in the fact that it busied itself with only the form or the external element of Kavya. It could not go deep into the core, namely Rasa and Dhvani. Now we shall see about Rasa school. Rasa means sentiments. Sentiment, when we say it is sentiment, okay, but it is developed through moods, that is bhavas. A generalized resultant emotion in the spectator of a drama or reader of a work. 9 rasas, often called Navrasas, have been advocated by the writers on prosody and dramatics. Bharata was the earliest exponent of the Rasa school, followed by Udbhata and others. Then Rasa is considered to be the soul of poetry. When Riti soul of poetry, then here also the followers of Rasa school, they confirm that Rasa alone is the soul of the poetry. The discussion goes on. The sentiment is a condition in the mind of the spectator of a drama. It is the condition in the spectator, the hearer or the reader also, of a poem produced by the emotions of the characters and the emotions. Bhavas are excited by factors which may either be the subject of the emotion, as the loved one is in the case of love, or serve to heighten it as does the spring season. These factors are respectively called as Alambana Vibhava and Uddivana Vibhava. The result of the workings of these factors is manifested in the form of fainting, fatigue, tremor and others. All these produce a dominant emotion that is called Sthayi Bhava, which is permanently, inherently present in either the reader or the spectator, which in its final stage of growth acquires the name sentiment. Now we shall see the essence of Alankara school. See, Alankara, we have been talking about it as an embellishment factor. We have got 2 varieties, that is Shabdalankara and Arthalankara. The Arthalankaras rose from, initially there were only 38. It rose from 38 to many numbers, 200 later on. Bhamaha and Dandin were the main propagators of this school. This Alankara school took into account the factors which beautify a composition. They were aware of the significance of the sentiment in a composition, but subordinated it to the figure of speech. The period of origin of Alankara school is unknown, but Bhamaha, the strongest exponent of this school, for the first time declared Kavyam Grahyam Alankarat, that is, a poetical composition is acceptable or delightful to the connoisseur by reason of embellishment. Of all the extant treatises on poetics, the earliest one is Kavyalankara of Bhamaha. It was commented upon by Udbhata, an eminent theoretician of this school. Bhamaha recognizes separate figures of speech, Subdhalankara and Arthalankara. He is of the opinion that the indispensable element of Alankaras is Vakrokti, the speciality of or charm of expression, a twisting expression. It is not a direct, flat expression. Now we shall see what is Vakrokti school. Vakrokti is equivocation, we can say. Means that you are not directly telling a sentence, but you are adding some beauty by twisting the expression. That's why it is Vakra Ukti. The word Vakrokti means utterance which differs from the ordinary mode of speech, in a short way to understand. It is a mode of expression such that the listener conceives a different meaning from what is intended by the speaker or writer. The same thing, of course, in Dunyaloka, Anandavardhana also deals with, but he gives the name as Dwani. Here he is telling that it is a twisting meaning which is understood by the reader or spectator. The figures of speech are said to gain perfection by the use of the Vakrokti mode of utterance. According to Kuntaka's 8th 9th century, Vakrokti Jivita, a literary composition, as Vakrokti as the very life of a Kavya. Jivanam, Jivita means the very life. This Vakrokti strongly appealed to later writers that they recognized it as a distinct figure of speech. Kuntaka holds that Vakrokti contains a kind of Atishaya, a surpassing element, something which makes you to exclaim, oh, what a beautiful rendering it is, which an ordinary person cannot conceive in his mind. Which is an unavoidable factor, that Vakrokti is an unavoidable factor in the Vichitra Marga, that is a wonderful style which consists in Vakrokti Vaichitriya. Dandin also subscribes to this view when he maintains that all Alankaras are based on Atishayokti, that is hyperbole, in English we call it. Atishayokti is good for other Alankaras too. Embellishment is not possible without the quality of producing Atishaya or something strange or peculiar expression. The Dwani exponent Anandavardhana too admits, as I told you, according to Abhinavagupta and Mammata, Aishayokti exists like a life breath. The Vakrokti school is only an offshoot of Alankara school. Bhamaha and Kuntaka were the chief advocates of this school. Now we will see what is Dwani school. It is a school of suggestion. The theory of Dwani was introduced by Anandavardhana. The Dwani school attaches importance to the suggested sense of words. This doctrine is based on the analysis of words and their meaning. Words have three kinds of denotation, namely primary, secondary and suggested, that is Abhida, Lakshana and Vyanjana. To understand it simply, it is a little bit difficult for others. What is that suggestion? I would like to just give a small example through which one can easily grasp what is that suggestion meaning. When a person comes to your house, you say, let's go to hotel. When you say go to hotel, it is understood that you will have to go to hotel and then eat food there. So there is suggested sense. That is not suggested sense, that is the secondary meaning out of it. But what is the suggested sense in that is that go to hotel. That is the only sentence that one has uttered. But taking food is the secondary meaning. And he indirectly says that the food is not available to you in my house. So that is to be understood. That is the suggested meaning. You say, the Gangayam Goshaha, there is a statement. A hut is on Ganga. So there cannot be any hut on the flow of Ganga. But it is to be derived that the hut is on the banks of the river. That is the secondary meaning. So that is called Lakshana. The suggested denotation is found to be useful in the case of certain words which when uttered indicate some other sense not directly denoted by them. As I told you that the food is not available in my house. It is not actually by word conveyed, but it is inferred. In other words, what is expressed brings to the mind, in addition to its sense, something that is not expressed. In this respect, this doctrine is closely connected and was influenced by the doctrine of spota of the grammarians. So when a word is uttered, something is heard and you really understand what is that sound. So it is more or less based on that spota theory of grammarians. The upholders of this doctrine of Dhvani or Vyanjana, as it is called, declare suggestion as the soul of poem. A literary piece without suggestion is to be deemed as dead. What is suggested may be sentiment or figures of speech, and it cannot be expressed by means of words. The experience of it comes within the province of personal observation, and as such cannot be had by all. It is limited to those who had similar experiences in the previous verse and therefore could have a taste of them when they are repeated. Such experiences, when they are to be had through the actors on the stages, are treated by these men of taste not as belonging to the actors or themselves, but as universal. The men of taste have supreme bliss through these experiences which they derive from the stage or from reading a poem. Hence, the feelings, though painful, give to the man of taste a strange pleasure. So, when you are just reading a pathetic condition in a book or seeing a depiction on the stage, it is ultimately adding pleasure to the audience in the sense that, how beautifully he has projected this pathos. So, it is a pleasure, literary pleasure. Actually, the reader or the witnesser is not experiencing that same thing, same pathos, but the pathos is inducing the pleasure or appreciation of beauty of the expression or the depiction on the stage. The suggestion of the figures of speech or the meaning and others depends on that of element. The qualities, gunas and figures of speech are related to sentiment. It is just like a person who is attached to some sort of a guna, that means he is a good person. The goodness is always attached not to the body but to the mind, and the mind is attached to soul. In the same way, in poetry also, the gunas are always attached to the soul of the poetry. The advocates of this school have classified the literary compositions into three classes according to the importance given to suggestion in them. The three classes are the Dhvani Kavya, in which suggestion is given prominence, then Gunibhuta Vyangya. We have been talking about Lakshana there, Gangayam Gosha. So that is also a sort of poem, that is Gunibhuta Vyangya, in which it has a subordinate place, and Chitra, in which it is totally absent. Chitra is only verbal jugglery. When sentiment is to be suggested, long compounds ought not to be used even in prose. So when you want to project a particular rasa, an aesthetic pleasure, you are not expected to resort to long compounds in writing a poem or in delivering a dialogue. We are coming to Guna school now. See, Guna means generally quality, and Sabda Guna, Artha Guna we have already seen, and Vamana and Dandin were the chief exponents of this school. Sri Shankuka and Mahimambata were of the opinion that the Sabdalankaras and Arthalankaras alone do not embellish a kavya. Another requisite is Guna. The Guna-based style emphasized by Dandin is Riti, extolled by Vamana. Dandin generally does not use the word Riti but uses its synonyms Marga and Vatpan and so on. His emphasis on Guna, to which the Alankara theorists were indifferent, marks his speciality in comparison with them. He holds that the Marga imparts grace to the composition. This idea shows as a supporter of the Riti school. Now, Anumana school. Whenever you talk about Anumana, this is always connected to Nyaya Shastra. Always the hair splitting, mind breaking also. So, Mahimambata is aggressive representative of the Anumana school and the reputed author of the Vyakti Viveka. Mahimambata is a powerful logician, and he attempted to show that the principle of suggestion enunciated by Anandavardhana is only a variety of inference. Philosophers have recognized only two significant capacities in words, Abhida and Lakshana. And what is this novel capacity called Vyanjana? It is his question. This question is put forward to explain the peculiar process other than Abhida and Lakshana of words through which the true import of the poetical sentence is arrived at. Mahimambata contends that this process is nothing but logical thinking. This is a peculiar variety of immediate inference called Kavya Anumiti, where the ideas strike the trained critic at once without his going through the cold process of reasoning, or by express reference through poetry contribute to that aesthetic pleasure. These ideas that are inferred should culminate in the development of some rasa, otherwise they are not delectable and are mere puzzles. The function of the poet is only to represent the vibhavas, anubhavas, etc., that invariably lead to the manifestation of rasa, the soul of poetry. Mahimbhatta's conception of the realization of rasa is probably inspired by that of Sri Shankuka quoted in the Abhinav Bharati, and it is almost identical with it. According to Mahimbhatta, vibhavas, anubhavas, etc. are the artificial causes, effects, and accessories for the kindling up of some imaginary or unreal emotions like love, etc. And when these are inferred and experienced by the reader through his complete imaginative sympathy with what is described in poetry, they become delectable and are called rasa. But this Anumana theory failed. Mahimbhatta regarded that rasas are inferred, and by thus reducing the process of the realization of aesthetic pleasure to one of cold reasoning, he took away much of that inexpressible charm from poetry. And later critics attacked him for this drawback in his theory, which, like Kuntaka's Vakrokti theory, died away for want of adherents. Then comes Auchitya theory. Auchitya means propriety. See, anything you want to say appropriately at the appropriate place, you'll have to make use of the words, and also the context also is very much important. This school was propounded by Kshemendra and that of Auchitya, which stressed on propriety as the main factor, contributing to the excellence of the work, and advocated by Kshemendra, who took the hint for this theory from earlier writers. Kshemendra wrote a work called Auchitya Vichara Charcha. He is the only one to talk about in the form of a book regarding Auchitya. So he puts forward a novel theory that Auchitya or appropriateness is the soul of poetry. By Auchitya, Kshemendra means a certain poetic harmony or fitness of things. Uchitasya yo bhavaha tat auchityam prachakshate. The necessity for Auchitya in the development of rasas has already been pointed out by Anandavardhana, who held that the absence of Auchitya is the one impediment to the realization of aesthetic pleasure. Auchityat nanyat rasabhangasya karanam, he said. So Kshemendra reversed that opinion, saying that the presence of rasas contributes to Auchitya. See, if the rasa is present, then it is Auchitya or poetic harmony. He extended this principle not only to the alankaras and gunas, but also to many other elements of poetic expression like word, sentence, poem, verb, case, gender, number, etc. So for anything you use, you should have Auchitya or the appropriateness. This Auchitya conception of Kshemendra is very comprehensive. He clearly shows how all the different principles expounded by earlier writers could be brought under poetic harmony, and his exposition and illustration of the various kinds of Auchitya are very intelligent and telling. He accepts the classification of rasas recognized by Dhunikara and the Abhinavgupta also, and he is accepting the ninth rasa, Shanta, because Bharata has only given the list of 8 numbers, excluding Shanta. The theory of Dhuni is also tacitly admitted, while the two rival methods, Vakrokti and Anumana, are left out of consideration. So thus we come across 8 schools of poetry, each one vying with each other, trying to explain different methods or modes of expressions which are adding to beauty, whether they call it as the soul of poetry or the life of poetry, the very prana of poetry. According to Dandin, he says guna is the prana of poetry. So whatever they call it, but they try to go deep into the subject, then they try to find out how the beauty or the aesthetical pleasure is derived through which mode. And all these schools are very much interesting. If a person who wants to become a poet or a critic should go through all the crux of these informations, and finally he can be the best critic or the poet. Thank you.